video is brought to you by Raycon and their all new everyday earbuds. It's a massive glow up for Raycons, adding new features like active noise cancelling and multi-device connect, all while remaining at Raycon's famously reasonable price. Click the link below to get 20% off your order or stick around to the end of the video to learn more.
I recall being seated at the Xbox showcase in LA back in 2023. And yeah, we were all looking forward to news about Fable and Starfield and what have you, but it was this surprise announcement that had me really lean in. It was called South of Midnight, the next game from We Happy Few developers Compulsion Games. Safe to say, I was completely bowled over by the stunning visual style, the stop-motion inspired animation, the Deep South setting, and the music, especially the music, immediately shot to the top of my watch list. My anticipation for this became a little more tempered though during the gameplay reveals. While I was still in love with this presentation and setting, on the gameplay front it seemed pretty stock standard as far as action-adventure games go, and the lack of inventiveness in this regard is echoed in many critic reviews, putting it at a score of 77 over on OpenCritic. Now that's a pretty good result, for sure, but in this gaming zeitgeist, in this economy, I think a lot of people are going to see a score like that, see its middling launch player count on Steam, the general lack of buzz online, and brand South of Midnight as mid, thus not worth their time or money. So that's what I want to help answer in this review. Is South of Midnight mid? Well, I think that's going to depend on how much you value the gameplay side of video games. Having finished the game, I will say that mid is a word I'd use to describe the core gameplay. You have absolutely seen these exact traversal and combat abilities in other games many times over, and often done better. Because while the fundamentals here are sound, the game's sing-song structure and simple encounter design does lead to a sense of repetitiveness that the best action-adventure games manage to avoid. But for me, I believe a video game can make up for its lackluster gameplay if the rest of the package is exceptional. A recent example being Never. That's a game that had similarly simple gameplay and didn't do much with it outside of a couple notable levels. I hold it close to my heart not for its gameplay, but for its top-notch art and music. I would say South of Midnight sits in a similar camp. It too is woven together by several outstanding aspects that make it worth experiencing despite the trite gameplay. It's in the narrative, made up of a daisy chain of poignant, moving stories packed into a digestible 10-hour runtime. It's in the way it's all presented, with this inspired visual style and masterful use of composition and lighting to deliver some of the most gorgeously rendered spaces I've ever seen. It's in the music, not just because it's one of the best soundtracks you'll hear this year, but for how expertly it's been implemented, infusing the game with a sort of musical theatre quality that I really jived with. It's also in how this distinctive Deep South setting so beautifully informs all of these aspects, bolstering South of Midnight with such a strong sense of identity and focus. All these things are executed so well that I found myself genuinely chomping at the bit to reach the next new character, cutscene, location, and boss encounter, even when the gameplay got a little stale. Put simply, without this art, music, and setting, South of Midnight is kind of a mid-video game. But with them, I think it's something pretty dang cool.
Ain't no way.
Oh, Weaver, like you must have seen stranger things than me.
South of Midnight's story begins in Prospero, a fictional town nestled deep within a county heavily inspired by that of Louisiana in America's Deep South. It's there you meet the game's hero, Hazel, and her mother Lucy, who are preparing to evacuate the town to escape a huge storm. They get into a little disagreement. Hazel reluctantly goes to check on her neighbors like Lucy insists, but amid doing so, watches as her rickety home gets swept downstream with her mother still inside. And so begins Hazel's journey across the state to find her mum, along the way discovering her calling as the next Weaver, a sort of healer in service of troubled souls, equipped with magic textile tools that grant supernatural abilities. The characters here are a real highlight. Hazel in particular I found to be a really charming protagonist. The writers have clearly made an effort to ensure she doesn't fit the mold of that stereotypical abrasive teenager. Like, yeah, she's impulsive, but not to the point that she comes across rude or unlikable. Despite being troubled by the guilt of her mum's disappearance, you won't hear her trauma dumping to every character she meets. She keeps it bottled up, save for a couple scenes where she finds herself at her lowest point. In that way, both she and the other characters you meet along the way felt so human. They're all reeling from deeply rooted traumas. They each feel guilty about what they could have done differently, and that this guilt is their own to bear. But that's where Hazel steps up to the plate. She learns to put the needs of others before her own, to walk in the footsteps of her mother, who, as a social worker, often has to navigate these kinds of tough stories on a daily basis. While I don't think the story quite lands the profound full circle moment that I hope it would, I think this string of touching sub-stories does a good job at stressing the importance of lending an ear to your fellow neighbor, despite how things may appear on the surface.
Oh, those damn haints! This part of the river's filthy with them. Ever since my brother went missing.
If you let me take a bottle, I could help.
Overall, I enjoyed this story, not just for its characters and themes, but particularly for its presentation. The stop-motion inspired animation, the gorgeous art style, and the way each cutscene is framed and lit makes every shot so incredibly eye-catching. All the characters here are so brilliantly animated and voice-acted, able to express their buried pain in every subtle eye dart or restrained line delivery.
You know something about Tom, don't you?
Tom used to be my daddy's pet. Well, no one ever thinks they're serving Satan, but somehow he gets his business done.
They're each just so damn interesting to look at and listen to, particularly those pulled from the Deep South mythos, who have each been realized here with such imagination. I won't spoil the major ones for you, but like every exchange with this catfish dude was just an absolute joy. Couldn't get enough of that Cajun accent.
Whoa! Pardon my mud. What'd you see? Tell me all the juicy details.
Is this entertainment for you?
Well, fish ain't got no TV.
It's impossible to mention the visuals without talking about these environments, because goddamn, man, they are gorgeous to a degree that I don't think quite comes through in this compressed footage. These are largely linear levels, understated in their scale, but that's allowed the artist to be meticulous about the way it's composed and lit, making them each so visually impressive to behold. While a little bit of exploration is encouraged, the main reason I found myself exploring these spaces was just to bask in the scenery, to see it from different angles, to watch how the light shafts and rolling fog frame different parts of the environment. Internal spaces are especially rich, with colour packed with ground clutter and small details to create some environmental storytelling. The art direction in this game is just genuinely top-notch. It's also surprisingly diverse. Like, when you think of the Deep South, the main landscape that comes to mind is that of the swampy bayou, and while its rendition of that iconic landscape is stunning, it also ventures inland, in one moment showing off the warm yellow hues of farms, then in the next fields of vibrant flowers in bloom, then in the next vast pinewood forests and cascading waterfalls. Compulsion Games have made a concerted effort to ensure that South of Midnight pays homage to all facets of the Deep South, not just the parts represented in popular media. This is also apparent in some other nice flourishes, like its recurring use of the bottle tree, an image iconic to the history of the Deep South. After looking into it, apparently these were a tradition among slaves, said to trap evil spirits, which is precisely what you do here as a core part of the story. There's obviously this focus on weaving too. The world here is bound by a network of threads known as the Great Tapestry. Hazel's abilities are granted by these magic tools associated with textile work, like spindles. This too is of great importance to the Deep South, tied to the history of its indigenous communities. The Deep South is a setting explored in very few video games, but I can't think of any that explores the breadth of its culture, history, and folklore like this one does. Where that southern connection is perhaps most apparent though is in the music, and yeah man, the music in this game is a real treat.
Sick green sky and tornadoes flying. How much longer until the river's rising? Birds fall silent and the critters are hiding.
I honestly think South of Midnight would not be half the game it is without the brilliant work of composer Olivier de Rivière. This soundtrack is fantastic. It explores every corner of that southern sound, in one moment delivering frantic jazz, the next hitting you with heartfelt soul, gospel, blues, or country. Unlike most video game soundtracks, this one is actually led heavily by vocals. They're all sung as if coming directly from the characters, in a way that you would typically associate with musical theatre.
I remember my brother, his fate was so cruel. He saw things so different, branded a fool.
That's especially true of how this music has been cleverly implemented. On the composer's YouTube channel, he actually released a series of videos titled "What is Music Design in Video Games?" In it, he doesn't just highlight the importance of music that sounds good, but how to implement that music in a way that meaningfully enhances the gameplay experience. And South of Midnight could not serve as a better example of exactly that. As you progress each chapter, you'll hear these snippets of lyrics and melodies that themselves nicely complement each narrative beat. But then you hit that final sequence and you realize these were all just teasers, as they now come together to reveal the completed song, sending you off with one last banger of a musical number. Almost every chapter is like this, a wonderful auditory journey where you're sort of constructing these folk songs as you unravel the story of these characters. It really does feel as if you're playing through a musical, and hey, maybe it's because I've just gotten into musical theatre over the last few years, but I really dug that. We don't often talk about music design in the same way we do things like narrative design, but de Riviere demonstrates here how important it is for elevating a game's story, gameplay, and even the soundtrack itself. I mean, I've been basically listening to this soundtrack on repeat since I finished the game, and it's one I suspect I'll be regularly returning to. So I recognize that we're a good chunk of the way through this review, and I haven't even talked about the actual gameplay. That's because, set against the personality and creativity found across all these other elements of South of Midnight, the gameplay itself is, well, unremarkable. South of Midnight's core gameplay is, on balance, okay. Hazel's got a familiar traversal and combat toolkit, but it's also more than functional. She feels responsive to move around with, her abilities are beautifully animated and accompanied by nice VFX and sound design. South of Midnight is a smooth, pleasant game to play. But that's about the best I can say of it, because while these fundamentals are sound, the gameplay certainly does become a little stale. Part of it's to do with South of Midnight's rigid gameplay structure. Each chapter sees you exploring these semi-linear levels and doing some light platforming puzzles as you make your way between a number of combat arenas. Once you've cleared them all, you do a brief chase sequence, conclude the chapter with either a boss fight or cutscene, then move on to the next chapter. Some chapters are shorter than others, but they do stick to this general loop, a loop that you are forced to repeat over a dozen times. Now, as someone who's kind of burned out on bigger games, I didn't mind this. I welcome a game like South of Midnight that's very linear, that has this easygoing flow, particularly as it's a leaner experience that I can knock over in just a day or two. Still, I will admit that by about halfway through, the monotony was starting to kick in. I have less of a problem with the platforming. I mean, it doesn't demand a lot of you, sure. It might have been nice to have some optional puzzles that were a lot more challenging, like other games with this kind of traversal do, but as a pacing mechanism, I think it's fine. It gets the job done. The combat, though, is the bigger issue. It's not that it's bad, it's just very basic and doesn't well leverage Hazel's capabilities. Firstly, I think combat is conceptually disappointing given the promise of Hazel's magic tools that revolve around weaving things, pulling at the strands of an ethereal realm. This could have had some unique combat implications. Instead, she's relegated to just smacking enemies to death with sticks, while firing out generic magical blasts. Then the combat loop itself mostly consists of you spamming your light attack, dodging attacks that aren't super well telegraphed, so you just kind of spam dodge anyway, and performing these finishes to get a bit of health back. There's a light skill tree here to enhance your abilities, but it doesn't meaningfully change the way that you engage combat, nor do the various enemy types. While they do encourage you to prioritize certain targets, none of them will really force you to break your combat pattern, as every incoming attack is dealt with by dodging, and on the standard difficulty, everything sort of dies quickly anyway. Further, every combat encounter, aside from the bosses, are set in this same circular, flat arena. I would have liked to have seen arena designed with some verticality that makes use of the traversal abilities. As is, encounters tend to play out basically the same way every time, and that repetitive loop does get a bit tiresome. There are a handful of boss fights here, and they offer a nice change of pace, with multiple phases that introduce some new attack to dodge, some extra platforming between the phases. But again, they're nothing standout. They mostly just have you running around in circles, avoiding attacks until you can stun them for some damage. They usually make up for it with their visual and musical spectacle, but I will flag that the same cannot be said of the final encounter, which was especially underwhelming. Obviously won't go too much into it, but yeah, in general, I'd say that the final moments of this game do feel rather rushed, which is a shame. So yeah, South of Midnight's core gameplay is rather forgettable compared to everything else it offers. But I'll say again that it's not bad. I certainly never found it a frustrating or grating experience. The overall pacing really helps with that, I think. This is a concise 10-hour journey where every half an hour or so you find yourself in a totally new space with a completely different vibe, meeting some eccentric new character with an interesting short story to tell. The gameplay feels kind of secondary to this experience, to be honest. The main reasons I would encourage you to play South of Midnight is for the characters, the art, the music, and just the general vibes. All of these things are S tier and are sure to leave a lasting impression on you.
I saw how she treated you, Lacey.
And how did you treat Mom? Somebody's enjoying themselves over there.
So in summary, South of Midnight has a decent story and superb art, animation, and music, but it's weighed down a bit by repetitive core gameplay. I think some will hear that and understandably raise the question, would this have been better as an animated film? Did this really need to be a video game? Now I will concede that as an animated film, this captivating setting and story would hold up. Its excellent visuals and music would hold up. But I would argue that yes, despite how naff the gameplay is, this experience is greatly enhanced by being a video game. It's only through an interactive medium like this that you can fully appreciate these gorgeous environments from every angle. A fight sequence against an alligator the size of a 3-story house would not hit the same without you yourself in control of the hero, without the chorus of his banger boss theme sweeping in every time you enter each new phase. Is its $40 price tag a bit steep for what feels like a 10-hour interactive musical? For some, maybe, but it also cost me like half that amount just to go watch a 2-hour movie with some popcorn and a drink. So for me, I think it does justify that price tag. If you feel otherwise though, then I have great news. South of Midnight is available right now on Game Pass for both PC and Xbox Series consoles. So yeah, if you've got Game Pass, you should check this out. You've got nothing to lose. The past week has been chaotic, to say the least, with so much discussion around the Switch 2 and Marathon and tariffs and whatever else. So it's easy to see why South of Midnight might have slipped beneath people's radar, but I implore you to give this a go if you have a deep appreciation for video game art and music. Compulsion games deserve a lot of recognition in this regard. I hope that Microsoft continues to support them as a partner, regardless of how well it performs. Enough to birth a sequel or just another game like this. I feel so strongly that a follow-up to South of Midnight that retains this inspired art and music direction and just makes some slight improvements on the gameplay, I reckon that game would be a real winner. So yeah, South of Midnight from a gameplay perspective is mid, but I've never played a game that looks quite like this, that has a soundtrack like this, that leverages the cultural tapestry of the Deep South like this. That is why I suspect this wild ride across the bayou and beyond will stay with me for a very long time, and that is why I recommend it to you.
Listen, I know that you know what Raycons are. You've seen them all over the internet for years, including from myself. I've been partnered with Raycon for like 4 years now. Massive shout out to them, by the way, for the support they provided the channel. So you think you've seen Raycons 100 times before, but you probably haven't seen these Raycons, because just recently, Raycon did a full refresh of their flagship product, their everyday earbuds. This new model is an evolution of Raycon's already incredibly solid and reliable product, improving every aspect of it while also adding entirely new features. On the improved side of things is the design, which is even more comfortable and ergonomic than before, and their in-ear design means that they stay on your ears way better than many other earbuds. There's also improved battery life. These things will go up to 32 hours now, 8 hours of direct playtime, and a fast charging case that gives you 90 minutes of playback in just 10 minutes of charging. In terms of newly added features, the everyday earbuds now have active noise cancelling, and this is a feature that you usually have to pay like a premium for from other brands, but Raycon have just added it while maintaining their same affordable price point that they've always been famous for. There's also now support for multi-point connectivity, meaning you can sync 2 devices at once, and the earbuds will automatically switch to whichever device is outputting audio. It is super convenient being able to sync these things to like an iPhone and an iPad at the same time. They even went the extra mile with the case, since in addition to your choice of colors for the earbuds, you can also buy a case protector that comes in a range of additional colors. I got the yellow sunset option, making it a lot easier to spot when I leave these things laying around my house, which is what I usually do. I've used Raycons for literally years now and have always been impressed with their performance and reliability. Hell, I actually own a few pairs at this point. I keep one next to my bed and one in my gym bag so I never accidentally forget them. If you want to grab a pair for yourself or others, then you're in luck, because Raycon are doing a special deal for viewers of this channel. Visit buyraycon.com/skillup to get 20% off your order. That link is below and in the pinned comment, but it's buyraycon.com/skillup for 20% off. Thanks Raycon for sponsoring the video, and a big thanks to you for watching it.